out. We'll call it a 20-second lead in here, but if you're catching us on the replay, but if you're catching us live, that means it's 7 p.m. Central Time on a Thursday night, which means it is time for the Car Guy and SIXFAN show. Tonight, I'm your host. I'm Grant Tommy. I am straight SIXFAN, which makes me SIXFAN of this joint operation, which means this gentleman over here.
I am Jason. I am the Car Guy of the Car Guy and SIXFAN show. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight. We're pretty excited to have Uncle Tony, and I think Uncle Kathy is kind of behind the camera tonight, but we're so happy to have you guys back to the Car Guy and SIXFAN show once again. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, nice being here. What's going on, guys?
Yeah, I mean, our guest is one who needs no introduction, but in case you've been living under a car for the last couple of years, Uncle Tony's Garage is joining us on Season 8, Greatest Hits season here on Car Guy and SIXFAN show. And just a simple reminder, this is a joint operation, but also we are powered by the Get Out and Drive podcast, so another partner out there for us. But so Jason, before we get into our line of questioning, how about you just jump over the chat and see who's joined us so far?
Absolutely. So Mopar Den was the first one in the chat tonight. So welcome, Mopar Den. We've got 5-0 Magic. Coda Improvements, Joanne Meyer, one of our moderators, is here. Paul Meyer is here, as well as Will's Wheels, Drew Hobbins, as well as Papillon Cycles and Greasy Boy Customs. Dan is in the house. Bubba Ayers just popped in there.
Can you turn the volume up on there? Guys, we're having some technical difficulties. The camera on the computer isn't working, so right now
move it closer to you.
I'm on Kathy's phone on a tripod, and I'm looking at you guys across the room on the computer. So if this is a little weird or disorienting,
yeah, I gotta move stuff a little bit.
It's my first day on the job.
Hang on.
That's okay, because we're not going to complain. We're pretty happy to have you here, whether we've got the screen on or not. But as we said, this is a partnership with the Get Out and Drive podcast. And before we get into any questions for Tony, we want to remind you guys that National Drive Day is October the 2nd, and this is an event that is put out with the Get Out and Drive podcast, and we want to make sure
if you could turn up the volume
and head on over to getoutanddrive.com. You'll get one of these stickers, and you'll be able to post that on your toolbox, on your car, and take place with the National Drive Day on October 2nd. Thank you for doing that. And now that we are ready, Tony, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're still trying to figure out. All right, she's trying to get volume going here because I can barely hear this. I have top fuel hearing, meaning I have none. So, you can't. Okay, she can't open it. All right, but yeah, we're doing good. Everything's like, we're rocking along real good. The channel's nice and happy and growing, and all of our projects are moving forward. How are you guys doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I wanted to make sure that tonight, because I think last time we had you in on the channel or on the show, you might not have been able to see what was over my shoulder. And obviously, if you're having difficulties with with seeing us tonight, you might not be able to see what I've got over my left shoulder here. But maybe you can. Maybe you can see it now.
All I can see literally is the back of her phone.
Okay.
This is what I'm saying. It's a little disorienting here.
That's okay. I thought I would show off my Mopar colors with my 79 Cordoba, which is kind of sitting right behind me here. But one thing I guess that we really wanted to talk about a little bit, spend some time talking about, is your involvement with the No Name Nationals. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about
that. Wait, I can't. Say that one more time about the No Name Nationals?
Just your involvement, and just wondering if you could talk a little bit about it.
Oh, I have absolutely no involvement. It's the event belongs to John Wilburn and Dallas, my friend Dallas Brown. I have no involvement with it other than I was just helping to promote it.
Well, that's pretty cool. Do you plan on taking part in it?
We were going to race Bottle Rocket against Casper from Unity Motorsports Garage there, but there's scheduling issues with Casper. So it looks like we're going to have that match race. It's a $4,000 winner take all, one run off the trailer. No, just like go. It's like death match. But it looks like it's not going to happen at the No Name Nationals. I believe we're going to do that in Knoxville sometime around Halloween. One of our cars is going there. Mopar Al is bringing Slag Hammer, and I think he's supposed to race Barrow's Garage, but I'm really not involved in any of that.
Well, and I know obviously Bottle Rocket's been kind of a cult following or kind of an icon of your channel for a number of years now.
That's my problem child.
Yeah, or problem child. And it's so much so that I know that you kind of cut your teeth a lot on the Mopar 4-speed in your drag racing days. And that's what you're used to, is just jamming those gears. But the decision's been made recently to, switch it over to an automatic. So maybe talk a little bit about that thought process and what led you to that decision.
Well, the biggest thing is I'm not a drag racer. Like, I spent my childhood, the first 2/3 of my life, drag racing was my universe. I'm a YouTuber now, and it's to me, it's my time and my energy is much better spent making videos for a broader audience than out attempting to race a car. So my problem is I need to have somebody take these cars out and do that stuff for me while I stay at the shop and I do what I do. This is my job. So being a 4-speed or a manual transmission is the biggest issue. I can't just take anybody, stick them in the car and send it. And so that was my biggest reason for converting it to automatic, because the car's been sitting around for the last year and a half, since the last time we ran the car. So and I've already got a driver, somebody's going to take this car and campaign it. I've already got somebody lined up for this for next year. But right now, I'm just getting it all set up so that I can say, turn the key, look, there's the world, take the car, go out into the world with the car and do your thing. And you don't have to worry about, broken transmissions, broken rear ends, clutch issues, and all of the stuff, all of the fun, all the mechanical fun that goes with a manual transmission.
So in general, do you prefer an automatic when you're hot rodding, or do you like, slamming the gears, or what?
Okay, could you say that one more time now?
When you're just generally hot rodding, if you're out driving whatever you're daily driving, do you prefer an automatic or a 5-speed or a 4-speed?
We may have momentarily lost Tony here, so while he unfreezes or they find a stronger internet connection, I guess we'll just remind everybody that in much like the last couple of seasons, we do keep track of all the generous givings of you, the follower. So any super chat does get documented on our end, and we do have kind of a rewards program set up. We do try to give back at the end of the season. So just a little healthy reminder there. We do pay attention, and we do appreciate those super chats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did happen to notice that Turlo's Garage had mentioned, where is everybody? There should be 1,000 people in here by now. And I believe he's absolutely right. So if you guys are watching this, now is the time that we've got a little bit of dead space here, that maybe we can share this chat out, share the show out on your socials, hit that share button, and make sure that everybody that follows you knows where you are tonight, because I think that's the idea, is making sure people kind of jump in here and see what's going on. I think we're somewhere around 30 people in the chat here right now. So I see John M. Patina Pit Stop has jumped in there as well, and King Eric, the greatest of all, Doug Narden, as well as I've mentioned earlier, Andy Turlo has jumped into the chat. So thanks, guys, for being a part. And we do have a super chat in there for you, Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. We've jotted that down, so we'll put your name in the hopper, and we'll see what happens on season's end, whether or not you walk away with a cool prize pack of some capacity. We shall see. That is, I think also while we're waiting for Uncle Tony to join back in to try to sort out whatever the issue is on their end, I would say maybe now's a good time to let the chat figure out some questions for Tony. Now's a good time for you guys to take a little extra time, think about a question you might have for Tony, and we'll make sure they get asked as soon as they get back on.
And in case you guys are wondering why Uncle Tony is on our live stream again, well, it's simply because you guys asked for it. You wanted to see some of our favorite guests come back and be a part of the show, and Uncle Tony was one that was way up there. So we decided to reach out to him and Uncle Kathy one more time to see if they would be willing to participate. And as always, they were very willing to be a part It's just a shame that they're having some technical difficulties here right now, trying to get back on the live stream. We can probably talk a little bit about, Grant, some of the guests that we do have lined up for future episodes and some of the things.
Hey guys, sorry for the technical difficulties.
No problem. We made up some stuff, and I think we sold some people on some bunch of BS. So we're happy to have you back, Tony.
Yeah, so I'm sorry again. Like the computer is just so. Where were we? We were talking about bottle rocket.
I think I left off with the question of, if you're daily driving, whatever your favorite car is, do you prefer the automatic or the standard?
To me, they're both. You know, I don't. I can explain it. I'm just impartial. You know, 4-speed automatic, 3-speed, 5-speed. It doesn't make any difference to me. I like whatever it is that I'm in. Does that make any sense? Like, I appreciate the virtues of each of those things. A bang shifting automatic is just magic, right? And having, you know, and rolling gears is fun too. So it's like I like them both. I like them both.
I think, Tony, you must be setting yourself up for some sort of a political campaign in Tennessee with that answer. You just wanted to make sure that you got everybody's vote. So very well done, Tony for governor. 4-speed for everybody.
Oh, we got a great governor here. We got a great everything in Tennessee.
Yeah, I spent half a year there myself with an internship, and lived in Antioch, so I enjoy the area. I love going back to Nashville anytime I can get. But Tony, you're talking about kind of, you appreciate the merits of no matter what it is, whatever the car is, and you fall in love with the car. And so I know since the last time you were on the Car Guy and SIXFAN show, we were kind of on the heels of your Slant 6 mania. But since then, you've fell in love with yet another straight 6 or inline 6 motor, which is not, it kind of is a Mopar, but it kind of isn't, because it's really more an AMC. But talk a little bit about the love affair you found yourself having with the XJ.
Oh, well, the XJs are fantastic. If you go back to my pre-YouTube mechanic days, I did a lot of work. I mean, the Jeeps in New York City, Jeeps were everywhere. I had a lot of customers with those. You go back to the 1990s, in between everything else that I was doing, I always ran a shop out of my house. And those XJs were very popular on Staten Island. So I worked on them constantly, and I got to know those engines, and I got to love those engines. I mean, the AMC motor, the 4-liter has its roots all the way back in the 1960s, the Typhoon 6. So I've always had a thing for AMC inlines. They're fantastic engines. The XJ stuff. Okay, here's one of the things with this channel. We are always throwing out ideas to see if they catch. And the Jeep thing was one of those. We threw it out there and see if there would be enough of interest, enough to make momentum, you know, to carry momentum and do projects. So we threw a few videos out there, and it didn't fly. So I had lined up a couple of Jeeps to do projects with. We were going to do off-road with one of them, and the other one we were going to do basic hot rod stuff. We floated a couple of videos. It didn't get the kind of response. And again, so it's a channel. It's stuff that I have fun with, but at the same time, it's also a business. So I can't really pursue projects or directions that don't have the audience's, you know, the audience's stamp of approval. The audience.
They don't maintain the level that you're used to operating at.
I'm sorry?
Like you can't justify a video that won't maintain kind of a certain like threshold.
Yeah, and it's not so much a video, because it's not the video, it's the series. And it's always, okay, so it'll work like this. You'll throw an idea out, and if it's popular, the first video or two will get, let's say, 40,000 views, 30,000, 40,000 views. And then what'll happen is you'll see that for each successive video, it'll drop. So you'll have 40,000 the first one, and then you say, well, okay, we're gonna pull the motor apart on this thing, and have 35,000 views, and I go, okay, we're gonna do the cam, and we're gonna do the head and everything, and you have 28,000 views. And so, and this is a normal cycle for any type of project. So when you float a project or a direction idea out there, if it doesn't have a significant bite, if you don't get 50, 60,000 views and a lot of positive, you know, reinforcement towards it, then you know, if I start going down this path and I devote energy, time, and resource to this project, it's going to be a point of diminishing returns where it's not going to get enough use to support itself. And so that's why, again, with the Jeep, I love the Jeep thing. My daily driver is a 98 XJ. And it has been for like the last year. I can't stop driving this truck. I love the thing. But we had a couple of other project trucks that we lined up just in case it did catch, and it didn't catch. So we cut those loose.
And I think to some point too, regardless of the size of your channel, that theory does play into effect. If you do a video on a specific type of project, whatever that happens to be, if that first video blows up and does really well, that's a pretty good sign that people want to see more, even if it's diminishing results as the project goes on. But if you do a video on a new project and it flops, don't waste your time.
Right. It doesn't even really have to flop. Just understand that a mediocre response is always, you're not going to pick up viewers or you're not going to pick up interest in a project as it goes along. It starts at maximum interest because it's a blank slate. And then as the project evolves, it keeps getting pigeonholed smaller and smaller and smaller until it's a very, very specific thing. You know, it gets refined down, and every step of that refining, you'll lose some viewership on it. And so that's how you have to look at it. The thing with YouTube, it's like any business, honestly. You can't be afraid to try new things, but you also can't be afraid or hesitant to cut ideas loose if they're not going to work. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
that's how we survive.
Yeah, that's a basic business principle. You know, you do what somebody else is not doing in hopes that you can do it better or with a specific niche that attracts people to it. You know, we're doing that same thing with our videos. And I guess where I was going with this was, you know, I think probably if we go way back, you know, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I was, you know, first started my own YouTube, I was stumbling on some carburetor issues and trying to find some answers to carburetors. I think that's how I ended up stumbling upon your channel. You've always got some great carburetor commentary, I should say. I don't want to go any further than that, but I guess if I was to ask the question about carburetors is, do you prefer an aftermarket carburetor versus a stock one? And if so, or if not, why?
Well, I mean, in my world, pretty much every carburetor that I come across is aftermarket to one extent or another. The exceptions would be, let's say, on a few of my daily drivers, Slant 6, 318s. Those have, you know, BBDs and BBSs and the Holly, the small Hollies. But for the most part, for any of the performance applications, they're all aftermarket carburetors, either Holly or Edelbrock. I prefer the Edelbrocks for daily driver street use, because they're so easily tuned. You know, externally, you just keep a bunch of drop rods in your glove compartment, and this, you're climbing up a hill, you're going to stop for gas. Great, change the drop rods. It literally takes less than a minute. You know, so for daily drivers, I prefer the Edelbrocks, which is just a clone of the Carter AFB. And for performance use, anything where you need more than, let's say, 600 CFM, I go with the Hollies.
Yeah, it's a lost art, and it's something that, well, if you're like my age, you know, I was dorking around with carburetors for the first time 2-3 years ago. So it's definitely a learning curve. If you didn't grow up with it, you know, it's something, but that's what's awesome about the hot rodding culture in the hobby is that there's plenty to learn all the way around. And I think that's what you do such a good job at, Tony, is being an instructor for a lot of us. You're really good. Just your delivery method is very much an educator style. It's very, very easy to digest. So as you find yourself working through your YouTube career, what is sort of the if you're describing your own role as to what you think you're doing on YouTube, what is that?
Exactly what you said. There are different types of channels. There are ego-driven channels. There are people who are just showcasing things that they have. There are people. My philosophy with it, when we got involved in YouTube, and this was my same philosophy. Remember, I was in the magazine business for a long time. You go back to the 80s and the 90s. My philosophy has always been to be of service, right? Offer something. See, no matter what type of video we do, there'll always be, I'll make sure that someplace in that video is a fact of some sort, a trinket of experience or trivia or basic knowledge. To me, that's the foundation that the channel is built on. Nobody wants to see what I drive around in, and if they do want to see what I drive around in, I don't really need them as viewers. I want people who love this stuff, who are trying to learn this stuff, that are trying to extend their knowledge, their building their experiences. That's who we do this channel for. So no matter what kind of video we do, even if it's just taking one of our cars out and beating it up a little bit, in that video is going to be built around something that the viewer can learn from, not just an exploitive thing. And a lot of people don't understand like where we come from with this channel, but that's it. It's the whole point of this is to be a service, and that's why we've been able to. That's why we've been able to make a living with this. YouTube it's a full-time business. It's a job, it's a business, but that's how we've been able to do it because we approach it as a service.
We did have a question come in from Mopar Dan, and he says, Uncle Tony, put me on track to an excellent Chinese copy of a Carter BBD that works excellent with my Coronet 318.
Those Amazon carburetors work really well. I've used them now on a couple of different motorcycles. I haven't had. I used one on a boat. I haven't used one of the BBD knockoffs. But I mean, from what I understand, every Chinese cheap Amazon carburetor experience I've had has been fantastic. So I know. Oh, don't talk up the Chinese. It's like knockoff stuff. But you know what? If it works, it works. Forget about where it comes from. We're past that point in the history of this country and this culture where we can be choosy as to where our parts come from, and that's just the bottom line to it. So yeah, and then eventually, hopefully, we do start manufacturing this stuff. And that's one of the big things. Like for instance, motorcycles, you can buy an SNS Super E, where a lot of the parts are manufactured overseas, but it's an American carburetor, and it's going to cost you $450. Or you can buy the Amazon one for $80. Drop it in; it's exactly the same thing carburetor. It comes with an assortment of jets, and they work fantastic. So I am the biggest proponent of American manufacturing, support America, do America, the whole bit. But we're not in a position where we can do that. That ship sailed like 40 years ago, back in the 70s, when we should have been beating away the foreign economic invaders, but we didn't. So now we're in a position where you buy what works, you use what works. Some of it is crap. Chinese hardware is junk. The stuff that we get. Don't get me wrong. The Chinese, for their own purposes, they can make some really fantastic stuff. They can build world-class machinery. They have world-class metallurgists. They have all of the things that they need to create first-rate quality stuff. What they export, what we get here, is bottom of the barrel. So that's, you know what I mean? You have to take that with a grain of salt. I hate it when people say, "Oh, they just," just like the Japanese. If you go back to like the 70s when it was all Japanese stuff coming in, people were like, "Oh, it's Jap crap. It's no good. It's all junk and everything else." They knew how to build some serious stuff. They would just send them the second-rate things over here. And it's the same thing with the Chinese now. Hopefully, we can take back our position as the leading, the world standard of manufacturing. But for right now, Chinese Amazon carburetors, it's hard to go wrong. There's really nothing inside a carburetor to go bad. You know what I'm saying?
With something that is as simple as a carburetor, as few parts as there are, there's less parts to screw up, and there's also like that layer of fits the application, right? Like, so I mean, if you're building a, I gotta go for reliability on hot rod drag week, and this thing's gotta consistently help me run 11s, so I win my class or whatever. Like, that's a different story than daily driver. And I know I've heard some other YouTubers speak highly of. I think Jegs has a knockoff of a Holley carburetor that performs really well. as well. But Tony, I want to also just give you credit for, I think, you know, again, I've probably stumbled upon your channel during the Slant 6 build hysteria right at the beginning. And, you know, so one of the things Jason and I share in common is this idea of offbeat hot rodding, things that are just a little off center, a little left of mainstream, and just something different, because we see LS swap the world so many times. You know, just be different, do something like, you know, cut your own path. One of the things I've really appreciated about your channel is that you kind of have this, you love the small displacement V8s, and so I want to talk about a little bit about like which are some of your top 2 or 3 small displacement V8s.
Well, I mean, they're Mopars right there. The 273 is a fantastic little motor. The 318. And these are engines that, like, when I was younger, I mean, you can remember, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, so it was like big block or nothing, you know, 440 or go home, 426 Hemi or forget about it. And so we didn't bother with any of these little motors. Now I have a whole different appreciation for them. And the small journal, small block Chevys, the Windsor Fords, I love those engines. Again, so people think of me as, I say, I'm a Mopar guy, but I'm a mechanic in general. And they think of this channel as a Mopar channel, but I am not a Mopar channel. It's just that I happen to own Mopars. I happen to have a big history with Mopars. And so I use Mopars to illustrate concepts, but I try to make them as broad as possible. Does that make any sense? So, and you go back to the Windsor Ford, I had the IHRI pure stock record with the Windsor Ford, only 1343 at 101 miles an hour with an engine that the valve covers never came off of. So I have great appreciation for all of these, you know, little motors. And my friend Dallas has a 215 Buick, which he's trying to find a purpose for. It's just sitting on his, you know, on the garage floor right now. But that's something I'm hoping he comes up with something we can do with that particular engine, because that looks like it could be a lot of fun. I like offbeat stuff. I have a bunch of motorcycles, right? But my favorite is I have this little Honda Super Cub. I bought a 2019 Honda Super Cub. I remember I've in my past I've had leader bikes, I've had Ducatis, I've had, you name it, I've had it. I have Harley Davidson's up the wazoo. But I love my little Super Cub. You know what I mean? It's like 9 horsepower, but there's just, so I'm not the typical guy. I'm not the typical, you know, blood and guts, right? Yeah, been there, done it. Got the T-shirt. I did the nitro thing. I'm over all that. Now I just like playing around with like smaller engines and things.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know where it was, or I think it was just recently, I heard you say in a video, and it might have even been an old video, that there's a reason why you drive slow cars today. Tell us a little bit about that and where that came from.
It's simple. If you give me anything with more than, let's say, a moderate amount of horsepower. So in my mind, a moderate amount of horsepower is like 500 horsepower, 600 horsepower. I become a 12-year-old. I have no self-control. I have no, the common sense just flies out the window, and I'm not responsible. It's that simple. I wish I had control over the way does that make any sense to you? I'm one of those never lift people. I shift at valve float. I like a demonic force takes over. Once I'm into the fun zone, and I become a 12-year-old, and it's just that simple. It's that simple. So I stay away from that kind of thing.
So fun zone's like where the numbers turn red on the tachometer. Is that what the fun zone is?
The fun zone. The fun zone begins when you hit the gas and you go, oh. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, like 400 horsepower won't give you that unless it's in a 2,000-pound car. 500 horsepower will give you that. 600 horsepower, you start to get there. You're in the 700 horsepower range. You hit the gas, it goes and does its thing, and you go, oh. And as soon as that happens, it's like goodbye common sense. And so I stay away from that type of thing. I told the story. I think I got a picture someplace where I had a fuel Altic, and I built this thing. I actually got licensed in the car. But I built this thing, and when I built it a little too small because I was looking for profile. Okay, I was looking for and then it was like the car had to have a certain aesthetic to it, so I wanted it to be low and mean looking and everything else. So I built this car, and when I finally got in it to go run it, and I had my fire suit on and my helmet and all of the face mask and all that stuff, I didn't fit in the car. I couldn't get in the car, so it was all like jammed in like this. And the thing with this now was that when you hit the gas, you go blind. You can't see anything. So the very first time we took the car out, it was you see, common sense. It goes right out the window. The very first time we took the car out, it was in November. I guess it was 1982, 1983. It was cold. It was like 30 degrees. And we went to Atco Raceway on a street night, like a Friday night when they just had street cars there. And so there's no fire, there's no safety, there's nothing. Okay. And I had never driven a blow nitro car before. And I was like, I just don't care. You know what I mean? I'm going to get my rocks off. So we loaded this thing up, brought it to the track, got there. It was dark already. It was freezing cold. I didn't fit in the car. I couldn't see anything. And what was the very first thing I did? I did the burnout with the car. I had never done a burnout in a blow nitro car before. I was amazed how easy it was. Just look at the throttle and there it goes, right? And I did a couple of chirpies just to get used to the car. I staged it, and the tree come down, and damn, it's going. You know what I'm saying? Because no common sense. No, you see what I mean? No, like, caution, logic, everything goes right out the window. So that was my first experience with it. And I was completely blind. Could not see a thing, because as soon as you hit the throttle, my head was so jammed in there with the roll cage and all, that when you hit the throttle and the car started to vibrate, I lost all my vision. Everything was just a blur. I didn't care. Hammer down. Let's go as far as we could. So make a long story short, next time we took the car out, I had scheduled to make my license runs with it. So I had Bob Van Sciver, who ran a jet car by Rio Logano, licensed funny car guy, and they were going to sign off my license. I had to make these 3 passes. So for the IHRA license. So I made the first pass, and it was only supposed to go, where they want me to go, like 100 feet. So you're supposed to go 100 feet and click it. So I did the first pass, and I was blind. Couldn't see a thing. So we went back to make the second pass. I said, well, I gotta make some room for myself. So I took all the padding off the roll cage, and I ripped. I had padding on the seat. I took the padding on the seat off. I got in the car. I jumped up and down on the seat to bend the aluminum down so I would sit a little bit lower. And I got back in the car, and my head was still touching, just barely touching the top of the roll bar. So with that, nobody was looking, and I reached in and I scooped all of the padding out of my helmet. So all I had now was just the helmet shell and styrofoam and my skull. That was it. And I went out and I drove the car this way. It went into tire shake about 300 feet out. I don't know, whatever, however far it was, 300 or 400 feet out. And like that, put myself in a hospital. So this is why I stay away from fast cars, because when it gets to a certain level of power, I lose all common sense and respect for the machinery, and I don't belong in there. You have to know where you should be and where you shouldn't be, and I should be outside the car, not inside the car.
Well, it sounds like you kind of know your limit. And on that note, I want to make sure that everybody in the chat knows that, I've never owned anything capable of doing the when I step on the gas. And I do aspire to do that someday. And I think it was Andy Turlow who asked me if I turn into a 12-year-old when I step on the gas and the Yugo. No, I don't turn into a 12-year-old, maybe an 80-year-old, because time runs awful slow in that thing. So that might change once we get the Toyota engine swapped over into that. But at the end of the day, Tony, you mentioned just very briefly about doing your drag racing, and of course you don't do that anymore because you're trying to focus on YouTube. So you've been doing YouTube almost full time now for how long?
4 years.
4 years, and
well, 3.5 years. It's been paying the bills,
and it seems to be doing all right for you, because I think your channel's up to almost 250,000. And
I think we just crossed 250,000 like right now as we're talking.
Yeah, so congratulations on that, and congratulations on being able to make YouTube your career, so you don't really ever have to work anymore, right?
That's a joke, right?
It is, absolutely.
If you want to, first off, I have a moderate channel, right? You know, I'm a small channel. I'm not, you know, I'm certainly not Cletus or Whistle and Diesel or anything like that. I'm one of the big, or Vice Garage. I'm one of the bigger small channels, but to run this channel effectively and efficiently, it costs me about $100 grand a year between the shop, all of the various expenses, money that has to go into the cars, projects, all the stuff to just keep going. It costs about $100 grand a year just to maintain the shop. So there's enough money left over to pay the house bills and eat. So it's a full-time thing. It's 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's so much of it that you never see on camera because it's just mundane. You know, you're not going to see me cleaning parts for 6 hours to get ready to make a 10-minute video. But that's the reality of YouTube.
Well, and I want to go back to one of the things you said earlier. I think I caught a similar comment in a former video of yours, Tony. You were talking about how you didn't set out to create a Mopar only channel. It just happened that you had Mopars, and by default, then you had inventory to easier support future projects. And I'm kind of finding how much sense that makes to me. I'm on my second project car here on my channel. You know, I had a Windsor, I had a 302 Ford, and I had a lot of Fox body parts, and now I'm in the G body scene. And it would be nice to have maybe some leftover parts from my last project to help support the next one. But I'm learning a lot more by switching platforms. And I know I was actually doing research for for one of my videos with and so I was seeing if a title was already taken, G body, this, that, or the other. And of course, one of your videos came up, and you were talking much about, hey, if you didn't have this inventory of Mopar stuff, you would highly recommend people getting into the G body. Talk a little bit about what you think the genius is of the GM G body.
It's just the GMG body is just the culmination of the technology that started with the 1955 Chevy. It's you take the last of the G bodies, the 1988 G bodies, and it's a 57 Chevy or 55 Chevy that's just been refined and refined and refined and refined and refined. And it's just, how do you beat it? It was the biggest corporation in the world, the greatest corporation in the world, the greatest minds, the greatest engineers over the course of several generations, and the G body is where it ended. So that's my love for the G, and I absolutely love those cars. And I know them like the back of my hand. Like I know them as well as I know. I don't know the history. Okay, I'm not a Mopar, I'm not a G body trivia guy. I couldn't tell you how many 82 442s I made or anything like that. But from a mechanic standpoint, I know those cars like the back of my hand. You could like literally just put a bag over my head, a handful of wrenches, point me at one, and I could feel strip the thing and have it back together again just as easily as I could with a Mopar.
So, having said that, what do you find that Mopar has their G body?
No, for me, Mopar, I'm not one of those blind loyalists. You know, there's a specific era and a specific engineering language that I identify with that makes me a Mopar guy. So previous to, let's say, 1960, let's use that as a rough point of entry, and post 1980, let's make that a rough point of departure. Anything really outside of that design language, I don't identify with. So to me, like a modern Dodge Challenger may as well be a Subaru or I have no allegiance, or I don't identify with them.
So at the end of the day, you would say that you think that GM kind of did nail that down with the G body, but Chrysler and maybe not until, as far as I'm concerned, not till the late 70s, early 80s did Ford do it with the Fox body. But you don't think that Dodge has kind of nailed down that one platform and just perfected it?
You mean the modern Challengers?
No, I'm talking like just Mopar in general. Like we talked about the G bodies being like a 55 Chevy that's just been built on and built on.
No. See, the lineage changes completely through Chrysler's history. If you look at Chrysler product, okay, there was an era of post-war engineering, true engineering superiority, the 1950s, and that's where the Hemi, and that's where the roots of the engines, the big block, the small block, the polyheads, and all that, the roots of everything that evolved all started there. But the same way with General Motors with the let's say the 55 through G body platforms. But Chrysler, it ended with Chrysler in the late 70s. Like they went off into a completely different direction. They abandoned that design language, where General Motors stayed with it. If you were to take and I'm only using the Chevy as an example, right? But if you take a 1955 Chevy and you field strip it down to its most basic elements, and you take a 1988 Monte Carlo and you field strip it down to its most basic elements, they're the same. They're the same. And you can't make that claim with, let's say, a 55 Dodge and a 1985, 88 K car or whatever it happens to be. So that's what I'm saying. Like there's a specific design language that General Motors engineers stuck with. And again, see, it was the biggest corporation in the world at the time, a powerful corporation in the world. They had engineering staffs that were the most brilliant people in the world, and they were designing a car for the middle American market, right, which is the biggest market of them all. And so that's where you find that excellence that starts at 1955 and ends in 1988. And that's why I consider the G body to be the ultimate incarnation of the classic American car.
If our friend Jeff Ford was on this panel, he would probably be telling you, and I'm the resident Ford guy here on this panel, so I'll speak for him. If Ford had anything of a similar time frame, it's because they just didn't let go of a piece of not the best technology, like the twin I-beam suspension. It probably ran from 1963 to 1996, and but that was more a byproduct of they just didn't try to improve on anything for that long.
Ford never stuck with anything for any amount of time. You know, Ford. I mean, okay, yeah, I know you take an engine like the Windsor, and yes, it has a very long history. But the actual the cars, the design language of the cars changes. Like Ford always seems to out-trick itself. It always seems to try to outdo itself. It's like Ford is like the tripod corporation. You know what I mean? Oh, this engine is fine. Let's put some overhead cams on it. Why? I mean, the 4-liter is the V6 is a perfect example of it, right? You had this awesome pushrod engine, right, that fit every application under the sun. It worked beautifully. I worked on, I can't tell you how many of those engines. Not the 4-liter, the 3.8, the one that ended up in the Explorer. And then out of the blue, it's like, let's put overhead cams on it. Why? Why did you have to put overhead cams on this engine? Why did you do that? Well, it's not a practical packaging. We need to put a timing chain in the back. Why? Why did you have to put a timing chain in the back? Why? You see what I'm saying? That's the typical Ford thing. They overcomplicate stuff. The camera, the 427 camera is a perfect example of it. It was the answer to the question nobody asked. You know what I mean? But they went ahead and they did it anyway.
Yeah, I always relate Ford to. I guess why I relate to him so well is because I'm like that. I'm a designer, and I'm not afraid to try something. But it kind of goes back to one of your original points, Tony. Is like you got to know when to cut bait with things, though. Too. Ford's problem is they don't know when to cut bait with things. Like they try new things, and that's good, and that's awesome. But then, like, man, why did you hold on to this one thing for so long? Because it wasn't that great.
Well, what I think a lot of the problems that have a lot of the issues that not just Ford but all of the automakers have had over the last 30 years or so, it's a fact. It's a matter of overcomplication, and out tricking themselves, doing more than common sense would dictate. And like I said, turning that pushrod motor into an overhead cam motor, which made no sense because you're not increasing its RPM range. You're not going to say, well, this is an engine that doesn't work anymore once you get over 6,000 RPM because of the valve train. So let's go overhead cam so we can go to 7,500. No, it's still just sticking out a freaking Ranger or an Explorer and send it down the road. So it was a pointless exercise in doing this. And I think the biggest factor in that is the way corporate America is structured. There were too many engineers. There were too many people on the payroll. There's too many legacy engineers involved in things. And they all have to earn their keep. Every year they have to earn their keep by reinventing the mousetrap or coming up with a we need a power ashtray, but it's got to be a 6-way power ashtray. It's like, who really needs this stuff? What do you have? And it's just a matter of people trying to earn their keep. In my opinion, the automobile, the American automobile, just the world automobile, reached its peak of analog efficiency in 1970, 1971. And then from that point forward, it's been an overcomplicated, overstuffed thing. Every generation of car takes us further and further away from the things that we love about cars, if you're a mechanic.
So where do you draw the line at engineering excellence versus mechanical practicality? I say that, and I'll use this as an example. Oil filter placement. Why does it have to be up in between suspension components and hoses and everything else that you can't get a wrench on? And when you spill it, or when you turn it off, it spills oil all over the place. Like, there's got to be some engineering excellence somewhere along the line versus mechanical practicality that says, why can't we talk together and make this work?
We've had remote oil filter systems for as long as there has been pressurized oil systems. Think about it. There was zero reason to have an oil filter in an inaccessible place, other than to keep people from servicing their own cars easily.
And that might be the case. Yeah, that might be the case, because we've talked about it on our show before, about planned obsolescence, or the dealerships or the manufacturers just simply wanting you to go back to them for service work. I think I read an article just the other day that said a lot of European vehicles today don't even have engine oil dipsticks.
Right. I was just telling Kathy that we just had this conversation the other night.
Just relying specifically on the car to tell you when you're low. So, like, take away the serviceability of any vehicle, no matter how new or old it is. Where does that end? Like, where are we ever going to be able to buy a brand new car? And I don't buy new, but like, are we ever going to be able to buy a brand new car and be able to service ourselves anymore? Are we turning away?
Yes, we have to wait until after the collapse.
There you go. When do you predict that?
It'll be during, maybe I'm a little bit older than you. It probably won't be during my lifetime, but it'll be during yours.
I don't think you're that much older than me. Anyways, next question.
Well, Tony, one of the things you talked a little bit about, another project car, and I'll be honest, this is one that I lost sight of, and I didn't follow this build at all. But Slag Hammer, I just love the name of itself as a arc welder, right? So Slag Hammer just is an awesome name for a car. I was like, I don't even know anything about it, but awesome name. So tell me a little bit about what comprises and what makes up Slag Hammer.
Well, the Slag Hammer is a funny example, because you were talking about before stockpile of parts and why it's good to stockpile parts. And Slag Hammer is a perfect example of that. Slag Hammer is built out of parts that I've had laying around forever. So it's like, oh, yeah, I'll use that block, I use that crank, oh, I got those rods, oh, you use those pistons, I have those heads. And I got this transmission, I got the rear axle. So Slag Hammer is a perfect example of a car that was built out of stuff that was just laying around. It started out, it was going to be an off-road project. We're going to build just it started out as a parts car. It was a 4-door 68 Valiant that, before I started doing YouTube, I had a shop called Mid-South Mopars, and we were also in the parts business. So the body that is Slag Hammer now was a 1968 Valiant parts car. And after I cleaned out, it just happened to be left. It was in the corner in the back of one of my lots, and that was it. So I said, I got to do something with this car. And at the time, I said, all right, let's do this Gambler 500 deal, because it looked like it could be fun. So it was going to be an off-road car. So I got that body sitting back there, and it's stripped, it's wrecked, it's stripped, it is nothing there, nothing usable there. At the same time that I have this idea, I go by my friend Jim Bennett. Jim passed away about 4 months ago. And I'm by his place, and I look all the way back in the weeds, and I see a straight front axle sticking out of the woods at me, and out of the weeds at me. I'm like, Jim, what's that? He says, that's an old D100 frame. He says, what are you going to do with that? He says, it's going to the scrapyard. I says, I'll take it. So I went back, I grabbed it with my trailer, I brought it back to my shop. I says, I spitballed, okay, well, let's see. There's the body, there's the chassis. Let's do this. So I ended up shortening the chassis 20 inches and dropping the body on top of it. And it was going to be an off-road car. So we didn't make it pretty. And this is where the name Slag Hammer came from. It was all structurally welded together to be a rugged off-road thing that I can just go bouncing through the woods and over devices, jumping over logs or whatever it happened to be, right? So I overbuilt everything, and it's all lots of steel in there, and it was all done with a flux core welder. So it's got splatter everywhere, it's got slag everywhere, and that's where the name Slag Hammer came from. The Gambler 500 race became this hit and miss thing. So it was on, it was gonna be off, on, off, on, off. And I was like, you know what? I can't plan for something that I can't count on the race actually happening. And I was looking at the car, and I'm looking at that drop front axle into the front of it. And I'm like, it wants to be a gasser. And that's when I started on the journey with that. And I started with a 2-door conversion. I converted it to 2-door, started refining the car towards be more of a gasser street freak type of thing. And then Al, the Mopar Al came along. And I was like, Al, I have projects up the wazoo over here. I says, if you want to jump in this thing, right, you do the finish work on the car. You clean everything up, you get it primed and so on and so forth, right? You do the basic body work, because the body was a wreck. I says, I'll build the motor, the trans, supply the rear, all that other stuff, put it all together, and then you can take this thing wherever you want to go. Take it on a power tour, and he wants to take it to the Million Nationals. So Al jumped in. He worked on the car for 6 months, really consistently, covered a lot of ground with it. And then he took it on power tour. And in the process, he actually got himself a YouTube channel out of it. He's got like 5,000 subscribers. And it's all from his exploits on that car. I think he took an opportunity and he leveraged it to its greatest extent. He did a great job.
Guys, we are kind of in the final innings, the fourth quarter. The end of the show is coming up very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to get some questions in for Tony. We probably only have time for a couple, but Redneck Rider 69 asked a little bit ago, what is the best engine built according to Uncle Tony?
The best engine ever built. I got to go with the small block Chevy. I have a very soft spot in my heart for small block Chevys. I mean, LSs are good. I'm not saying anything against the LS, but the original incarnation of the small block Chevy was the most flexible, the most workable. It didn't rocket to the top of the popularity heap just on luck alone. It just happens to be a perfect package, for what it is, inch for inch, pound for pound, dollar in, power or efficiency out. That's it. You just couldn't beat that motor, and it's friendly. It's friendly. So I would say the small block Chevy would probably be, if I had to say what's the greatest engine of all time based on all criteria, it'd be the small block Chevy.
And I think it kind of, again, self-proclaimed resident Ford guy, but I'll even admit, you know, to the tune of what you were talking about, from the 55 Chevy all the way up to the 88 Monte Carlo, so much of what small block technology is, period, is all basically the 265 V8. You know, the 1955 265 is basically everything that we've known as hot rodders. You know, it was all flathead Fords up to that point, and then that changed the whole everything. So it is kind of hard to debate the significance of the small block Chevy.
If you can, as a mechanically oriented person, right? If you can tear into it, and especially an early small block, you know, small journal like 327, if you can tear one of those motors down and not marvel at how perfectly planned out that engine is, right? And how well laid out it is, you're just not a car guy. You know what I'm saying? It's that simple. If you can't, there are certain things you have to be able to appreciate. Take the name off the valve cover, because ultimately the engine doesn't know what name is on the valve cover. And the Windsor Ford is like that too. The Windsor Ford, and there are certain engines that are just absolute turds, and I don't want to talk about turd engines, but that's, I would say, small block Chevy for number one. And I think, you know, not for nothing, okay? If you go back to the 60s, you go back to the 50s and the 60s, the 60s especially, the reason why they called the Chrysler Hemi the elephant is because elephants are afraid of mice. That's the cliche. So the small block Chevy, you know, was known as the mouse motor early on, before the 426 Hemi came about. So that's actually how the 426 Hemi got the name elephant, because elephants are afraid of mice and the small block Chevy is a mouse. And if you go back to those early days of Top Fuel, 1964, 65, 66, there were cars out there running small block Chevys that were running head to head with the Chryslers. The Chrysler didn't really have an advantage until the slipper clutch and tire technology came in. And then the Chrysler could carry a larger fuel load because of the way it could pass it through the combustion chamber. And that's when it actually had an advantage over the Chevy. The only reason the Chrysler Hemi took over in nitro racing the way it did was because the way the valves are laid out, the way the combustion chamber is laid out, it's just you could just dump liquid right through the motor, and that's it. That's the magic of the 426 Hemi.
Well, and if you guys have been watching Uncle Tony for any length of time, or you're just finding out who he is tonight, if that statement isn't classic Uncle Tony, where he's just going to tell you exactly how it is, I don't believe that he's got a blue oval, a pentastar, or a bow tie tattooed anywhere on his body where he's loyal to any one brand. Is he an aficionado of Mopar? Sure he is. But for someone to come out and say that, you know, the small block Chevy is one of the best motors probably ever built, will piss off a lot of, you know, those true blue diehard Ford Mopar guys when they think that, you know, their brand is the best brand. And of course, we all grow up fighting over who's what and who's the best and this and that. And, you know, I just want to point out that Danny from DD Speed Shop is in the chat. He says, small block Chevy, as if Uncle Tony wasn't already perfect. Then he says something like this. So, you know, even those guys, I mean, and Danny's a Chevy guy, I think, you know, deep down. So, you know, I think when you start poking and stating what I would consider facts about the automotive industry, I'm inclined to agree about the small block Chevy because of its use throughout history. It's been being used right from the 50s on up into, well, and there's variations of them still using it today. So I think the idea is that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are or where your loyalties lie. Sometimes facts are facts, and maybe you just don't agree with them. But, you know, I think there's and there's argument whether it's a fact or an opinion too. I think, you know, obviously it's Tony's opinion, but I might be inclined to agree.
Listen, I went through that blind brand loyalty phase, but that was when I was in high school, and maybe a little bit past that, you know what I mean, into my 20s, where it's just like, I'm a Mopar guy, because you have to belong to a tribe. You know, it's all part of it. You know, it's belonging to a tribe. I'm part of the AMC tribe. I'm part of the Pontiac tribe. So I was part of the Mopar tribe. But as you go through life and you start to see that there are such other amazing pieces of engineering out there, how do you not appreciate these things? I'm not a Mopar guy. I identify with a specific design language found in a specific era of Chrysler products. And that's it. That's as far as it goes.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on, and we'll kind of wrap things up. And I did want to remind everybody, this is a partnership. So Jason takes over next week. We have United by Trucks will be our guest next week. It will be on Jason's channel. Is also a partnership outside of YouTube with the Get Out and Drive podcast. And I know Jason could probably instruct you on best places to find that podcast. I know there are certain platforms that works better on, and there's, of course, the website. So, Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you. Let you close us out and take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing how we did touch on it, and there was a couple of guys. Actually, John Wilburn was in the chat earlier. I'm not sure if he's still there. We will give a shout out to the No Name Nationals, taking place September 30th and October 1st at Jeffers Motorsports Park. If you guys don't know where that is, according to the map and my geography, I would say that's roughly halfway between St. Louis and Memphis. Am I right, Tony?
I was out there last year. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So if you're in that area of St. Louis, Missouri, and Memphis, Tennessee, you're within driving distance of the No Name Nationals. Make sure you get out there and support those guys and John Wilburn and Dallas on those efforts on getting that thing set up there. So once again, Get Out and Drive podcast can be found over at getoutanddrive.com. You can listen now. There's also links over there to National Get Out and Drive Day. Make sure you guys are out there supporting that. My name is Jason, Old Car Guy. We want to thank Uncle Tony for being a part of our show again tonight. He looks like he's got something he wants to share there.
That's our new shirt. It's in the store now.
I hate cars.
Yeah.
So make sure you head over to Uncle Tony's YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to him. Find some of his merch over there as well. He's got that new t-shirt. Tony and Kathy, thank you so much for making this work for us tonight.
Oh, thanks for having us. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no worries. And guys, we'll see you next week over on my channel where Robbie from United by Trucks will be over there. We can't wait to see you. Stay focused on the windshield, not the rearview mirror. We'll see you guys next week.